So today we're going to discuss one other topic related to the coronavirus pandemic. And today we want to try to answer the question, what exactly do the vaccines do and how do they work? Now, to describe this, we first want to look back to a previous conversation that we had before, where we talked about the amount of virus in your body over time and how it changes. Now, we mentioned that once infected, the virus will attempt to increase its numbers, while in response, your body's immune system will fight back and attempt to keep these numbers low. Now, we also mentioned that the strength of your immune system is critically important to how well you can mount this defense, and that also the vaccine acts as a personal trainer to strengthen your immune system and make your immune response more efficient. So, in order to understand how all this happens, we want to first talk about how the virus actually infects the body. So, to understand that, we want to look at the structure of the virus particle. And so, I'm going to draw these lines here, which are going to represent a spike protein. So, the spike protein is critical because this is a tool that the virus uses to connect to your cell and infect it. And so it will attach to a protein on the outside of a healthy cell, and then that will allow it to enter the cell. And once inside, it will use the cell's machinery to make copies of itself. Now, one other critical element are the instructions that are used to make these copies. And so what I'll draw here are these instructions. They come in the format of a molecule called RNA. So it uses these RNA instructions to make copies of itself, to make all the proteins and all the other elements of the virus particle. So once it continues to make these copies, eventually these copies will escape the cell, typically harming it, and then these other copies will be able to infect other cells. So there are multiple pathways and mechanisms in the immune response that are critical, but we're going to focus on one that gets affected by the vaccine. And so we're going to discuss three particular cell types, and I'll start with the first one by describing how it works, and then we'll give it a name, and that name will become more clear after understanding the function. So the virus may be floating around in the body, and there's a particular cell type that looks for pathogens or bacteria, toxins, or viruses, or other things that should not be in your body. And once it encounters those of the virus or other pathogen, it will touch it and then engulf it. And so this cell type will eventually engulf the virus particle, and then it will break it into pieces, and it will use its machinery and the various elements of the virus particle to display elements or small portions of the virus particle on the outside of the cell. Now, the purpose of doing this is to trigger a signaling pathway. So it's going to use these small portions that is displayed on the cell surface to activate other cell types. Now, to understand this better, we want to give these small portions of the virus a name. These are called antigens. And so what the cell does is it presents these antigens to other cells. So I'll draw one here. And this is and so we can give this a name now, and we'll call it an APC, which is for antigen presenting cell. So in this presentation process, it's going to activate other cell types that are critical to the immune response. And so I'll mention one cell type first, and we'll call this a T cell. Now, T cells have several important functions, and we'll mention two of those now. So one of the first functions is that it will learn, based on this antigen that it interacts with, how to kill an infected cell. So it's going to kill the infected cells that are in your body, and this will allow it to slow down the spread of the virus. Now, another critical function is going to be to activate other cells. So it's going to activate others. So this brings up another critical cell type, which is going to be the B cell. And so we'll draw a B cell here. So once activated, this B cell has another important purpose and function that you've probably heard of before, and this is to produce antibodies. So this cell, once they become activated, one of their later functions are to produce lots of antibodies. Now these antibodies help by sticking to virus particles. And so you may have virus particles in the body that are floating around, and the antibodies will help by sticking to the virus particle and keeping it from being able to infect other cells in the body. Now, one other thing that we want to look into now is we want to ask the question, well, where does the vaccine factor in here, and what does it do? So one thing to note is that you will build an immune response naturally by being infected by the virus. But there's always a chance that you may have some other health complication, or you may have a severe response to the viral infection and get really sick. And so, of course, that's not really the best way to build up your immunity. So what the vaccine allows your body to do is to skip some of these steps so that you can build this immune response, make antibodies, prep T cells and B cells without ever actually having to interact with the virus itself. Now, there are several types of vaccines, but I'll go into one in particular, being the mRNA vaccines. And those include the Mrna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. So what those vaccines do is we learned what the virus looked like, and then we learned what all the instructions mean. And so the scientists took the instructions that explain how to make the spike protein. And so if you just take the portion of the instructions that are relevant to the spike protein, and they put it in a different format of molecule, which is called mRNA. So we've made mRNA that are specific to the spike protein, and we take these small instructions here, and then we put it into a packaging system to allow it to move around your body and also be taken up by the APC. And so these same instructions can enter one of your APCs. And once these instructions get inside, they basically teach your APC how to display these antigens on the surface of the cell. And so again, we're able to get to this antigen presenting step without your body ever having to interact with the actual virus. And once these instructions get in here, another thing to note is that the mRNA molecule doesn't stay around for very long. It gets degraded and eventually it's no longer there, but it allows this APC to learn how to do this antigen presenting step. Now, this level of instruction has been covered fairly well by in lots of different places, and including the CDC website, which gives you a lot of information on this. There are a couple of points that haven't always been explained that well, which are also very important. So I'll mention a few of those now. Now, one thing that I'll bring up is that it's been noted that over time, the numbers of antibodies in your body will decrease. So that means that over time, if you were vaccinated and you produced antibodies, a lot of times they'll measure your antibodies and they'll notice that they're lower. And so there's always a fear that if your antibody levels were low, then you won't have any immunity. But immunity is a little bit more complicated than that. So one of the things that I'll bring up is that your T cells and your B cells, once they become activated, can do one other thing. They can make what are called memory cells. So these memory cells stay in your body and can keep your body prepared. So even if over time your antibody levels decrease, you still have memory cells around, and you can have memory B cells and memory T cells. And these will allow your body to build up defenses more quickly than if you had never been vaccinated or never encountered the virus before. So that's one thing that's critical to keep in mind. Now, there is one other element which I will describe again. I'll describe as well, rather. So, as we mentioned, an antigen is a small portion of the vaccine. So, what we can do is we can zoom in here to the spike protein. And so I'll draw the spike protein much larger here. So, one other thing to note is that if you look at a diagram here, we show antibodies sticking to the virus particle. It's kind of an artist's rendering. It's not it's a simplified viewpoint. So what actually happens is that these antibodies and your activated cells, they are recognizing an antigen, which is a portion of the virus or a portion of the spike protein. So it may be a portion here or maybe a portion there. So what will actually happen is that you'll have antibodies that are designed to recognize this particular area of the spike protein and or this particular area. So when your body mounts an immune response, you're not just making a whole bunch of one type of antibody. You're actually making a whole bunch of multiple types of antibodies. So you'll have antibody 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there'll be lots of them. So even if over time the virus were to mutate and then this changes, even if antibody 4 doesn't work as well anymore, you still have other antibodies that can still respond. Now that gets more complicated, and I will go into more detail about that later, but these are some important elements to understand about the immune response and how the vaccine helps with it and how the vaccine works. And that's it for now.